Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and right next to me is my lovely co-host, the chattering teacup.
Hello.
And here with us, returning guest Teri M. Brown from across the pond to talk about her new book. Hello Teri and welcome back.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's lovely to have you back. And my first question would be, how is your ballroom dancing and bridge coming along since we spoke last time?
So the bridge is coming along really well. I feel like I'm, learning all the time. Ballroom dancing has had to be put on hold. My husband has brain cancer, and we found out in June, and he is doing chemo right now. And with the chemotherapy, you just can't go out and ballroom dance. There's too many people and too close of a space. And so we've kind of put it on hold at the moment, but we're still listening to ballroom music and, kind of pretending around the house. So we'll see. I'll probably have to start all over again with lessons because I don't retain those things if I don't use them. And well.
So please give him our best.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
And like I said, your book, An Enemy Like Me, A German-American Family's Joy and Sufferings During World War II, came out this year.
Yes.
So very new.
Came out in January.
Still warm from the printers. Yes. And it is, again, like your first book, also indie published.
Mm-hmm.
And you took us on quite an interesting journey. What can you tell us about your characters, about Jacob and his family?
So Jacob is a first-generation German-American. His family moved from Germany to the United States. And when he was a little boy, so he was born in the United States. When he was a tiny child, his father dies. And the next several years of his growing up are very difficult as his mother tries to, navigate being a single mother in some really difficult times in the U.S. where we had the Great Depression, and it was just very difficult. Jacob meets this woman that he falls madly in love with. She's very much way above his station in life. Like prior to the Depression, her family had been very wealthy and his family had never been wealthy at all. And so the two of them should never meet, but they do, and they fall in love and they have a child. And Jacob believes that he's going to live his happily ever after. I mean, this is what he's been waiting for. And World War II strikes. And sucks him right into the thick of things. He wants to fight because he wants to show that he's a patriot. On the other hand, he doesn't want to fight because he has a wife and a family. And, he wants to stay. And in the end, he ends up fighting because there's a lot of anti-German sentiment in the United States. They're afraid. And because of this, he feels like he has to do something to protect his family, to show that he is, truly American. So he goes to fight in the war. And when he does, he recognizes that he's more like the enemy than he is different than the enemy.
Yeah. And
so we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about the xenophobia that I brought up. And we talk a lot about war from a lot of different perspectives, not just a soldier, but all of the other people that are affected when war strikes.
Yeah. And we said he has his background, his family background is German. And at the beginning of the book, we learned that he also more or less changed his name from Müller, the German, and also his first name, Jakob, to Jacob Miller. So he would be perfectly fine being recognized as an American. And he also mentions that in the book compared to his Japanese Americans, because they can never, let's say, disappear in the background behind a American name, unlike him.
Right. So, a Japanese American can change their name, but they can't change the fact that they won't blend in.
Yeah.
Someone who has an Asian background will always look like they have an Asian background. But in the United States in particular, where we have such a melting pot of people, to be able to pick out someone with a German background versus someone with a Swiss background or an English background, or you don't just look and know.
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people in the United States, we've heard of the internment camps for the Japanese Americans, but few people knew that we actually had internment camps for the German Americans as well. There were not as many people in them because, like I said, you couldn't just look and point and say, well, that person needs to be in, the camp. But if you were too German, if they felt that you had too many connections back in your homeland, if they felt that you were attending meetings that the United States deemed was too, maybe that's like a Nazi sympathizer or something, then your family got branded. And once that happened, you could easily find yourself in one of those camps.
Were the Germans in German American different camps than the Japanese Americans, or were they in the same one? Do you know that?
I believe that they were in different camps. At least the one that I know about that was in the Ohio region was just German American. But that could potentially be because in Ohio, there were few Japanese American individuals. It was not a location. Most of the Japanese Americans in the United States were out west. They had come over to help build railroads and things out west, whereas a lot of the German American settlements came in through New York and then landed in Pennsylvania and Ohio were kind of the big, and then sometimes into Wisconsin, through that area. And so, I can't answer that. There may have been some Japanese Americans in those camps, but they were considered German American camps. Mostly because of the location.
And in the book, you also mentioned the fact that there have been sort of clubs of German Americans who tried to, how shall I put it, who tried to represent a positive picture of Nazi Germany. And that's also something he realized is a danger because he wasn't a sympathizer, but then this sort of pamphlet appears on his car, and he's very worried who's looking, who is observing them, and what shall we do? And I think it would be correct to say that it was also a factor in his decision to finally enlist.
Yeah, because he feels like these pamphlets were going around, and this was a thing. There was a particular group that was Nazi sympathizer type. They believed that was the right way to go, and that information was being passed around to these German communities, trying to find people who would support it. And he was very afraid because he ended up with one of those pamphlets. He didn't go out looking for it. But it'd be like going to the grocery store now and you come out and there's something in your windshield. I mean, and it's not like you put it there. But his fear was now someone may have seen him with it. And then he has a friend with him who ends up in a German internment camp, and he says, "Oh my gosh, if that's the case, if my friend can go, that means I could go."
And he also tries to protect his family from this, like you said before, this anti-German sentiment and the danger he is in, or he feels he's in. And I mean, would you say that he did, in his mind, the right thing for the wrong reasons, meaning that he should have told Bonnie what's bothering him, so she could have understood better why he had to go to war.
Wanted to go. I think that he felt, so I'm sure that in his mind he was doing the right thing. He was trying to protect his family, and what they don't know can't hurt them. I mean, we've all heard that before, right? If you don't know about it, it can't, put your head in the sand. And I think that he was probably also afraid that she would tell him that it was nonsense and try to talk him out of it when he firmly believed that he was right. And he had come to this conclusion, the only way to protect my family, this is the only way. And so, he just made the decision and he went.
Do you think would it turn out differently today in such a situation? Because in the 40s, I guess, men didn't discuss these problems that much with their wives and family because they were the protectors. And would it be different in this regard today? You think it would be more?
It might be, but I was saying something the other day to someone because husband and I are extremely close. We talk about just about everything. Like I feel like I can tell him most things. But we're going through a journey right now with his brain cancer. And there are times where I am terrified. You know, something has come up or there's a number that has come up in the blood work or something that makes me nervous. And I don't run right to him and tell him. I keep it to myself because I think, well, what good is it going to do to make him upset too? You know, and it's not that I'm hiding it. It's just there's no need for him to fret about it until we've talked with the doctor and we know what it means. Does that make So I would like to say yes, men and women today would talk about it and this would never happen. But the truth is that we all have our reasons for holding certain things close and not sharing them. And the reasons may or may not be valid. But they're ours and we hold on to them. So, you know, should I tell my husband when there's a number that scares me? Probably, maybe it would be, but on the other hand, you know, so it's like, yeah, I would love to say that men and women have progressed further. And I think that generally men and women have progressed further in their relationships in terms of more of an equality. But I still think that there are times where things bother us that we're going to hold them because we don't want to hurt someone else or we don't want to scare someone else. We don't want to worry someone else. And we feel somehow that we're being big and brave and whatever by holding it all in and taking care of it ourselves.
And I mean, his dilemma is then even bigger when he realizes that after his basic training, he's not going like he thought to fight against Japanese, but he will be shipped to Europe.
Yep. And can you imagine? So here he is. He's a man who, though living in the United States, has grown up in a very German community with German foods and the German language and German customs. And this is what he knows. And now he's going to be in Germany fighting against people. And he recognizes that they are just like him. He's one generation away from being on the other side of this war.
Do
you know, if his parents had not moved, he would be in war in a different uniform.
Exactly. Do you think, just a thought, because we spoke about it, Teacup, before we came on the show, do you think that his point of view is different from people that came to the United States in the 30s and went back to Europe to fight against the Nazis?
So, you know, it's interesting. My grandfather, I told you, we were in the United States since the 1700s. My grandfather fought in Germany in World War II. He rarely spoke about the war, but the one thing he said to me one time was, I always wondered if the person on the other side of my gun was a cousin. And that's what kind of prompted this book. Was that idea of like what makes an enemy. So I can imagine that anyone, and really if you think about it, it's easy to see it when you say a first generation German American goes and fights in Germany. It's easy to see how you can look at this other person and recognize that you're more like that enemy. But the truth is, aren't we all more like the enemy?
Yep.
You know, my grandfather was 5 or 6 generations away, and it still worried him. I can imagine, though, there's got to be something deep down, if you allow yourself to feel any humanity, to recognize that that other person, the person you're calling an enemy, is a human. Like you. And they may look different or talk different or think different, but they're still human. And that's one of the things I really want people to think about when they're reading this book. You know, like bring it into your own world and say, like, who are my enemies? Or not even enemies, but people, you know, we us and them all the time. You know, there's our group and that group over there, right? Well, look at that group over there. Can you find any similarities? Because the answer is yes, you can.
Yes.
And what would happen if we focused on those instead?
Yeah, true.
I think in the end, it doesn't matter if the people speak a different language or with different customs and a culture. Most people just want to live their life in peace, and
Exactly.
that's the one on the other hand. But I think governments, so they try to divide the people, because otherwise people wouldn't fight, because why should I? And
that's exactly right. And one of the things that I've said is, my husband was in the military for 25 years. I am not an anti-military kind of person. However, I do believe that wars are started by government. And it's ordinary people that fight them.
Yeah.
And it's ordinary people that have to live the consequences. And it's ordinary people who after the war have to figure out how to put their life back together again. And it's something to think about.
Yeah, because that's what you brought out in your book so wonderfully, is the impact the war has, not only on the people who fight in the war, but also those who remain at home.
I think everyone's touched by it in one way or another.
Yeah.
And we often focus on the soldier, which of course you should. The soldier has seen and done things, and it's difficult. And in today's world where we talk about PTSD very openly, we really look at the soldier, but very rarely do we talk about the soldier's spouse or the soldier's children or the soldier's parents.
Yeah.
We don't actually talk much about that. And we don't look at how does this affect them? And in this story, we see little William. He's 4 years old when his father leaves. And we see him as an adult looking back.
Yeah.
And we see that 2 years that he was missing his father changed him.
Yep.
Then when his father came home a different man.
Yeah. Yep.
He'd seen things and done things that had changed him. And he didn't talk about them.
Yep.
And he didn't let other people in to know what was in there. Right? And so that means that he was a different father, which means William grew up with a different man at the head of his household, which means that he became a different person than he would have had his father not gone to war.
Yeah.
Which means that when William had children, he was a different father for those children.
Yeah.
So it's a generational change. War doesn't just happen from 1 year to another year and that's it. Or, you might even say, okay, well, we'll give it a few years after that to allow for, rebuilding and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's not where it ends.
Yep.
Anyone who went through it in some manner, either as a soldier or as someone who loved that soldier, and really, even anyone who just had the devastation of war around them has been affected, and it has changed them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what also came up in the book was the question of those who stayed at home and about their mental health. And the big, we could absolutely say the big taboo it was back then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
A long time after.
You weren't allowed to have depression.
Yeah.
You couldn't have anxiety.
Yeah.
I mean, that was considered weak. And I mean, someone with depression who couldn't figure out how to snap out of it would end up in a mental institution.
Yeah.
So, if you weren't one of the lucky few who the depression hits and then you're able to move through it in a short period of time, if you're stuck in it, you'll end up in a mental institution, and then they will over-medicate you and you'll be there for life.
Yeah.
I have my husband was telling me that I believe it was his grandmother, or maybe his great-grandmother, was put into a mental institution because she had migraines.
It was a bit
they didn't understand them. She would get these crazy headaches and they determined she was crazy. And then the children ended up going and being put into an orphanage. And I mean, it was like a whole thing. And so, in the past, mental health, and even now, I mean, we claim that we're so much better, and we are better. But the truth is that if you have depression, you tend to not shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah.
You tend to very sneakily go and get your meds and sneakily go and talk to your therapist and sneakily have a couple of friends that you might, whisper a little something to, but you're not, people do not say, I could get on the phone today and call someone and say, oh, I've been having this cough Like, I don't worry about saying that I have it, but I'm not likely to call them and say, oh, I've been dealing with depression and I'm on 2 meds. I mean, and so we have gotten further, but we really haven't gotten to the point where we can say that mental health is as important as physical health.
True. Yeah.
And that if you're struggling in the mental health area, it's no different than struggling with diabetes or, high blood pressure or,
absolutely.
cholesterol.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And we have to function. I mean, isn't it also the truth? Because we are expected to function.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is like, if you have COVID, everyone tells you to like go to bed. No one expects you to do anything, right? But you have depression. But you have depression and you're supposed to get up and go to work.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell you, oh, well, you need to take a couple of weeks and that's and so there is a real disparity between physical health and mental health in terms of what we see it as.
It may be because you don't see it in that way. Because if someone's coughing or has a wound or a broken bone, you're able to see it.
It's obvious.
And the other one, with a mental problem, you don't exactly see it. The people might behave differently, but you still don't see a wound or something like that. And maybe
and even with like diabetics, you can't see it, but you can do blood work. And you can know there's numbers, but there are no numbers for depression. You can't do blood work and say, oh, well, this person's depressed and they're depressed at, this level. It's not there. So
that's true.
And
may I also ask you, you mentioned somewhere, I think, that you are enjoying research a lot. And
love research.
I was wondering, what, if at all, what was the biggest surprise for you while you did research this book?
So the biggest surprise was finding out that there were German American internment camps. That I did not know. I've had so many American history classes, and I would have thought there wasn't going to be anything about World War II from at least the U.S. side, looking that way, that I would be surprised to find. So that was very surprising to me. There weren't really any other super big surprises, although I did learn a lot of things. I learned a lot of cultural things in terms of like what products were available and what were people listening to. And I do a lot of research to make sure that my books feel as accurate as possible. So when I have Jacob listening to the radio when the announcement is made that Pearl Harbor has been bombed, I knew what time that announcement came out. And then I went and did research and I found what radio programs would have been available so that he was listening to a radio program that he would have actually been able to be listening to. Because I know that more than likely my readers are not going to go look that up. So I could have made it any program that I wanted. But I'd like to be accurate because the truth is that he could have been listening to that opera show because that opera show was on at that time on that day. So
you would be surprised what readers look up.
That is true. That is true. I would say about 90% of my readers are just happy that the story flows and doesn't feel like it jolts you. With something that's obviously not real. But you're right. There's about 10% of them who are going to say, excuse me, did you know that opera show did not come out until, the following year?
But then at least they are right. But sometimes people think they know something, tell you that you're wrong, whereas in reality, they're wrong. They just believe that they're wrong.
That also happens.
Yeah.
It does happen. And I usually take what people give me and I thank them. Thank you for pointing that out. And then I go do more research to find out, was I wrong? Because the truth is I could be wrong. I'm doing research, but I didn't live then. I'm only as good as the research that I've been able to do. And if someone knows something that I don't know, pass it on. I found out, for instance, in An Enemy Like Me, I think that I said something about the church cemetery.
Yeah.
I was told by someone a couple of days ago that it would be a graveyard because cemeteries are not attached to churches. Graveyards are. And I looked it up. And guess what? that is true.
Yeah.
Graveyards are smaller, they're attached to churches, and they're considered consecrated ground. A very different thing than a cemetery, which is just where people are buried.
Is there a difference? Sorry, is there a difference then between the United States and Europe? Because, for example, we in Austria usually have graveyards.
We use the same word for both.
Yeah, also that we use the same word in German for both.
I've always used the same word for both. But apparently, according to the dictionary, there is a difference. Graveyards, now it may be that as time has gone on, we have commingled the words so much that nobody even pays attention. But originally, graveyards were attached to churches, and cemeteries were burial spots that were not attached to churches.
Might it be because of the word yard?
Maybe, yeah, true. Yeah, maybe. True. Yeah.
But it was interesting. So like I said, I had someone point that out to me. It didn't bother me. I did not know.
Yeah.
I now know.
Yeah.
We do.
And so I think that's the that's the fun thing about research to me, is that you do learn little tidbits of things that you didn't know otherwise. It makes really fun, like if you're out at a cocktail party, you have little things that you can just throw out there.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's a bit on the macabre side, but again, since we are from Austria, we enjoy the macabre. And that also begs the question, if you have cemeteries, is there ever a need to, dig up old bones because you need the space? Because that's what happens in graveyards usually. You have to dig up the bones and store them somewhere else.
Yeah, see, and I don't know. Because in the United States, even in graveyards, we don't dig up.
Yeah, okay.
But I know that like my son was telling me that he spent a couple of years in Germany, and he said they do that there. Yeah. And so I think it depends a lot, probably on cultural and custom and space.
Yep.
In the United States, we still have a lot of space.
Yeah. I think
there's still a lot of space. Whereas in Germany and Austria and Europe, the space is,
limited.
You're very confined.
Yep. Exactly.
There's no growth going anywhere, and so so I think there are probably differences based on that.
I think they do it in cemeteries too here.
Okay.
Because if you don't pay anymore, then for the lot.
Of course.
I have a question for the cultural differences or backgrounds. I always got the impression that in the United States, people are very proud of their cultural heritage, for example, the Irish or the Italian. So how does that go with this xenophobia?
So, it's crazy. People are very proud, but there's also, when Germans came into the United States, they often moved into communities that were very Germanic. And they were very proud of that heritage. The people on the outside looking at them did not like it. And it isn't until generations later that we become more of a melting pot idea, that then you can be very proud of who you are and other people are okay with it. So it's in those early generations when the Irish first came over, they were considered, poor, dirty, unintelligent. They were, hardly used for, you almost didn't want to have them in your home even to clean. There was that idea that they were horrible, dirty people.
Yeah.
But 3 generations later, and they are now proud Irish Americans who can't wait for March 17th to roll around so that they can go have their parades, right? And so I think that it's both. It's when a new culture first arrives here, there's a lot of fear around that, where people are like, what are they going to do? Are they going to try to change things? But as they assimilate and take on more American customs, then it's okay to say, I'm an American and here are my Italian roots, or here are my Irish roots, or here are my German roots. The problem during this story was they were starting to get to the point where they were very proud of their German roots. And then the whole thing with Hitler and Nazi and scary, and that kind of sent everything backwards for a while, because then you couldn't be proud. You didn't want to be proud. You were like, you had to kind of hide it because it was ugly.
Yeah. But wasn't it also, or didn't it also start during World War One? Actually,
Yes.
because
it did. It started during World War One, and then just got progressively worse.
Yeah.
So, the town of New Berlin changed its name to North Canton after World War One and before World War Two started. So people had already started to do things like change names. Even stores were changing their names to sound more American.
Did people change their names too? More than before?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wonder, is that easy to change your name? Or back then?
I don't know what it was back then. Today, you can go to the courthouse and change your name. I mean, it's a matter of all I would need is some signatures from people who said that they know who I am and that my name today is Teri Brown. And then I fill out a form that says that I want to be Teri Green, and then it's done. I mean, I pay a fee and it's done. In the 40s, I don't know, it might have been even easier. And you also have to remember that a lot of people didn't even have formal documents.
Yeah.
So, and things that were put down, like I do a lot of family history research. I really love it. And my maiden name was Buffmeyer, Buffmeyer. Well, you go back a few generations and it's Buffenm, some vowels and an R. Then in the same generation, you see it with a Y, you see it with an I, you see it with two Fs, you see it with, and then when you get over to Germany, it doesn't even start with a B. It starts with a P. It's Pflaumenkuchen, Poffenm, Eier, or something along that line. I mean, it's like totally not Buffmeyer. And so I think sometimes at that point, maybe it was just as easy as saying, I'm Americanizing my name.
Yeah.
And you start saying, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And then in the next generation, so we'll say with Jakob Mueller, he changed his name to Jacob Miller, right? Yeah. And when his son was born,
exactly. He would be.
Now he has a birth certificate, and the birth certificate says that his name is William Miller.
Exactly, and not Wilhelm. I mean, if it had remained, he would be a Wilhelm, just like during World War One, the emperor.
Exactly,
and not William.
Exactly.
It also happened that when people immigrated, they set their name to some official, and sometimes they misunderstood the names because they were foreign, and so they were written down as someone slightly different name.
Yep,
and that's how they.
So, like I said, Hoffenmeyer. If you say that with the German accent, that T is. There's a lot to it, and whoever heard it heard a B.
Yeah.
And that's what they became. They became Buffenmeyers.
Yep.
My husband's family was a Pew. Pew. And they left the off of it, and they became Pews here. So that happened a lot. So I think that early on, it was easy to change your name. You just started spelling it differently, and nobody really cared. Today's world is a lot harder.
Yeah.
Now you actually have to go through the court system. But even then, it's as easy as I've collected the 5 signatures of people who've known me at least 1 year and know me as Teri Brown, and now I'm going to become
Yep.
I think it's more difficult over here.
Yeah.
But I also with famous people like authors from countries where they have a different system of writing. For example, Dostoevsky. In English, he's written differently than in German because people hear it differently, and you have to transcribe it in some way.
Yeah.
So it's a different spelling.
Yeah.
right.
And I also was wondering, Teri, what was the hardest part in this book for you to write?
I think for me, the hardest part was trying to write like a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
I show the 4-year-old having an experience, and I tried to remain true to what 4-year-old understand about what's happening. Because I felt that what he was experiencing was very important. On the other hand, he's 4. And he can't say, oh, well, mom and dad are fighting because, he didn't even understand. It was like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is new. What's all the loud noise? And he didn't understand the words that were going back and forth and like what is war to a 4-year-old and what is patriotic and what are all these words that he does not comprehend.
And also loved the name Roosevelt turned to Rooster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, you think when children hear things, they do their very best to say, okay, I know a word like that, because it doesn't mean anything to them. Like, why would you want to be called a rooster? Like it just didn't make sense to him. And so I worked really hard to make what he was feeling relevant, but also accurate for a 4-year-old, which is difficult because it's been a while since I was 4. So I was saying, but one of the problems that I had was I felt that he had some experiences that were like really needed to be delved into, but I couldn't do it from a 4-year-old's perspective. So that's why I have William also as an adult man looking back, because I'm able to then say, now as an adult looking back, I can describe to you some of what I felt and describe to you some of what was happening in a way that I couldn't have told you when I was 4.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also took him quite a while. It took him to be a father, a grandfather, to come not only to terms with his only father's behavior and the way he acted, but also to understand it better.
Right. And isn't that sad?
Yeah.
Because, that's kind of sad, but I think it happens a lot where it's after that person dies that you begin reflecting, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, I think I can see it now. I think I understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the problem is because they didn't talk to each other about it, he didn't have all the information to be able to understand it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The father that fought was doing the very best that he could. And the son was doing the very best that he could, but neither one of them talked to the other. And they probably both felt like failures. I didn't really, explore that from Jacob's side. But at times that Jacob looked at his son and recognized that he did not have a strong relationship with him. I know as a parent, if I'm not feeling like I'm connecting with my children, that I feel bad about it. So Jacob felt bad about this. And then you see William's feeling bad, and it would have taken nothing more than sit down and talk. And they could have resolved so many of these problems. And instead, they do what people often do, which is, harbor resentments and hold it all in. And, you look at little William when he was 4 was told to be a big soldier. Don't cry, be a big soldier, right? He continued doing that his whole life.
Yeah.
He kept trying to be that big soldier. He never was given permission to be a 4-year-old and cry that his dad was gone. He was never given permission to look at his dad and say, you came back a different man, and I need the man that used to be here. He was never given that permission.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot with children.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also didn't mention one of the strong characters, just by passing, Jacob's mother. She's a very strong character, and yet at the same time, I felt she was a bit elusive.
Yes. Well, she lost her husband young.
Yeah.
She lived in a foreign country where she never really quite fit in.
Yeah.
First generation moving into a new country, you never quite fit in.
Yeah.
You try all your life, but you never quite do it.
Yeah.
And she had the one child. She pinned all her hopes and dreams on him, and I didn't like her, but I understood her.
Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of understand that she's got this kind of harsh, there's one way and it's my way. And when her son went a different way, she didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And she also looked at it in terms of, this was the only thing that bound her to her husband was this son. And now he's off getting married and doing his own life. And she had never contemplated, well, what's what's my world going to be once he grows?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and there's really a lot of that in just the whole empty nest idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a mom, I have 4 children, and when my children moved out of the house, my first thought was, oh my gosh, whoa, what am I supposed to do now? Because while you're raising your children, everything is focused on those kids.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you do.
Yeah.
It's all about getting them grown.
Yeah.
And then they get grown and you think, whoa, what am I supposed to do now?
Yes.
And so, you know, that happened to her.
Yeah.
And then even more so, it was her only child, and she had done everything for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything she did was to make sure that he was okay.
Yeah.
So then when he moves out, she has no clue what to do with herself.
Yeah.
There's so much
And
time
she didn't
left.
handle it well.
Yeah. No. No, she didn't. She absolutely didn't. But it also begs the question for you, Teri. How much Pflaumenkuchen did you eat writing this book?
None.
None.
I don't even know how to make it. Do you have a good recipe?
Yeah, my mom has one.
I mean, actually, it's not Pflaumenkuchen, it's Zwetschgenkuchen.
Zwetschgenkuchen over here, yeah.
Would you send it to me?
Yes, I have to ask her. And you could also put other kinds of fruits in it. It's just easy to make.
Yes.
And
usually it's plums or apricots.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if your mom would allow it, I would love that recipe.
Yes, I will. I will ask her and I will send it your way. No problem at all.
Thank you so much.
and
let us know.
Yes,
how it turns out.
Yes, if you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, any recipes like that, I love to cook. It's one of the things I enjoy doing. And I like trying new things that are very different from something that I would be doing here. Just why not? Yep. I mean, you know, let's go ahead and try it. And so, but one of the problems is that you can go online and you can say, okay, well, here's a recipe. And then when you try it, you're not sure, is this real, or has this been like completely Americanized and is not even close to the real thing?
Yep.
Like if you've not ever tried it, then you don't know if what you've made is close to it or not. You know, it's hard, which is why I love getting family recipes, because these are tried and true and have been passed down, and this is what the family does. I have a friend who is Ukrainian, and she said the bread that I talked about in Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, her family makes that and has made a little twist to it and turns it into cinnamon buns. And she's given me that recipe, and it's wonderful because I know that it's real. You know, it isn't something that someone said is similar to. It's an actual recipe that came from Ukraine and has been tinkered with a little to adjust to the fact of what's available here versus what was available there. But it's that recipe.
Yeah.
And to me, that is so much better than just like going online and hoping for the best.
The only thing is, if you haven't tried it before, you're not sure how it should taste in the end. That's the only difficulty. But you can always pass it off as that's the original.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true. You know, it's as close as I know how to get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why not? I will pass it on. One way or the other, I will get it. I will get it out of her. And I also wanted to ask, I mean, you've touched upon it now a little bit already, but it also has a strong thread in your book, especially in the 2016 timeline of your book, that William realizes when he's doing this Veterans Day, because that's where we are. 2016 happens in one day. And he has to come to terms with many things about his father, but also about his relationship with his own son. And that's quite a revelation for him. And I think he turns into a person who in the end, I mean, he's now a grown-up, he's an old man. He wants to change that, and he wants to break this chain of behavior, or this things that he does and what he fears his own son does.
I would love to think that in the next chapter, if there were one, that you'd see him sitting down with his son and having a real conversation and telling him about his relationship with his own father and the things that he learned that day. And how he recognizes that he wasn't the kind of father he wished that he could have been. And is there any way that they can start from this point?
Yeah.
You know, and can we build something from here? And hopefully that son then would take a look at, gosh, how did I do raising my own kids? And can I start from this point? Because the truth is you can't change a past, but you can start from where you are and move forward.
Yeah.
You know, you can say, okay, so, you know, maybe I wasn't the best mom or the best dad during those years, but that doesn't mean that from this point forward, I can't be the best I can be.
Yeah.
I think also,
you know, so when you make a realization, you can do that.
Yeah.
But if you talk about the past, you can't change it, but you can give the children a different understanding.
And
exactly. And so they will feel a bit different about it, maybe.
Well, yeah, at least they would have an understanding as to, like, how did that happen?
Why?
You know, because a lot of times when we see things that are happening that you know, don't feel good to us, we assign reasons. Well, this is happening because, for instance, when you look at, you know, William assigned it as his dad was never proud of him and he couldn't do it enough.
Yeah.
And he came to realize, oh, that wasn't the reason behind it. That is not why dad was the way he was.
Yeah.
Knowing that did not change the way his father acted, but it did change his perception. And it was like, oh, you mean all of those times dad wasn't saying he wasn't proud of me. You know, it changes.
Yeah.
I know that once I became an adult, started having children, realized, first of all, how difficult being a parent was. The kind of grace that I could give my parents now, recognizing, you know, they did the very best they could do.
Yeah.
And I know that because I'm doing the very best I can do. And sometimes it's not very good. You know, there are days where I'm doing the best I can do. And on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 2. I mean, I'm not doing it, right? But if I could give a 4, I'd be given a 4. I don't have it to give. Once you start recognizing that about other people, then the relationships are easier because you recognize they're having a bad day. This isn't a good time. They're doing the best they can. It may not be very good, but it's what they've got to give at the moment. And I think that William realized that about his dad. And hopefully he's going to go now and talk to his son and essentially beg forgiveness. You know, I did what I could and it wasn't very good, but it's what I had.
Yeah.
And, you know, let's build something from this point.
Yeah. And let's start small with going fishing then.
Oh, yeah. We'll just go fishing together. We're not going to try anything big here. Just,
exactly.
You know.
Yeah. Small steps.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And Teri, the question also is, what's next? What are your plans now that you have finished book number 2 and it's out there?
Yeah, so book number 3 has been completed, first draft.
Ooh.
Yeah, I leave tomorrow, but of course that won't be true on the when this comes out. But I leave tomorrow for a 2-week retreat, and I'm going to be editing that. First draft. Once I get the edits done, I hope to turn it into my publisher and see where it goes from there. So I'm really excited. It's called The Granny Woman, tentatively called The Granny Woman. And a granny woman is a healer, like a midwife healer. And it's the term that was used in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. And she was not only the person that delivered babies, but she knew all about the herbs and the roots and what natural would help heal someone. There was also a little bit of what I'm just going to call mountain magic. It's this, they just had this belief that they had this gift. And because they believed it and the people that went to them believed it, some amazing things could happen that don't make sense. For instance, they could do things like someone could be severely burned on their, you know, we'll say on their arm, like boiling water. And this granny woman could talk the burn out of the arm. And when this arm healed, there wasn't any of the horrible scarring and they didn't have the infections and all the other things that could happen. Well, it doesn't make sense. You should not be able to talk to a burn and have it do anything. However, she believed it, and the person receiving it believed it. And there's a lot of power in our minds to heal, which we know because people who are optimistic are more likely to heal faster than people who are not. People who believe that they have a chance at becoming better actually become better faster, and some of them become better despite horrible odds.
Yeah, true.
Right? And it has a lot to do with this mind over matter. And I think that's what we see in this relationship because they both believe that this woman has these powers. So there's a knowledge about all of the herbs, and then there's the experience of dealing with people, and then there's this belief, so I talk all about that. And it's a 3-generation story because I love generational stories. And it's a grandmother in her, it's in the 1890s, and her daughter thinks she's a complete, whack job, totally crazy. No way that what mom is talking about makes any sense. And she becomes an actual nurse. And so there's this kind of fight against this old medicine feel and this new modern medicine feel. And then the granddaughter is kind of the one that helps them see that there's really good in both. There's no reason to throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's good things. And we do that as a society. We often throw old stuff right out the window. Something new comes in, we throw the old out. About 10 years later, we're chasing after that old stuff that we threw out to bring back not all of it, but some of it. And that's even true with modern medicine. If you look today, I'm a firm believer in modern medicine. My husband has brain cancer, and if it weren't for modern medicine, he wouldn't be here. On the other hand, there are a lot of things about the older ways of doing medicine where there was a lot of more preventative, where there was a lot more food-based and thinking about what you're putting into your body, a lot more listening to the person instead of just saying, you have a cold and these are the 4 things that you should do. They would listen to the person and change what they did based on what they're hearing. Those things, if you look, are starting to come back into medicine today. But if initially we threw it all out. And so that's kind of what this will explore.
There's some merit to how things were done in the former times. And not everything that's new is really good. We don't test it anymore.
And what you just mentioned, it reminds me a little bit of the studies they did on the placebo effect. When people suffer from certain kinds of pain and they realized it does work. Like you said, your mental attitude is important.
If you believe you're being given something that will help, a lot of times it helps, even if there's no reason for it to. And it truly is. Our minds are amazing. We do not even come close to understanding what our minds can do. And the placebo effect is one of those times where people are given nothing. They're given a sugar pill and they're told this will reduce your pain. And it does. You and I both know that sugar does not reduce pain. It tastes really good, but it doesn't reduce pain, right? But it does if you believe that what you're being given is something else. And so I think that's just an amazing So this all came about because I had a wart. And I said something to my brother about it, and he said, well, why don't you get someone to talk it off? And I said, what are you talking about? I've never heard that. And he said, no, I have a friend who can talk off warts. So I looked it up, and there are people apparently who believe they can talk off warts, but that led me into this whole granny woman where they believe they could blow in your mouth and get rid of thrush. They could talk to a woman's stomach and get a baby who was breech to flip over so that she didn't have to do a breech birth. Lots of really unusual things, the burns. And so the more I researched, the more I realized, wow, this is interesting. This has some really cool stuff. And then because I have it in the North Carolina mountains, I'm also able to bring in some Cherokee Indian medicine. So I have a little bit of the North Carolina mountain history and a little bit of the Cherokee history and then how that all kind of bumps up against the modern medicine.
And maybe also some Pflaumenkuchen.
Yeah, sure, without a doubt.
That's probably some kind of medicine too, because it helps you feel better.
Definitely.
Right. Oh, of course. Well, of course it does.
And I think
that's that sugar.
I think the reverse of that is phantom pain, because you shouldn't feel pain, but people do. So it's just the other way around. So
there's so much. Like I said, I think we would all be very surprised to find out all that could be going on.
Yeah.
That we don't tap into, but just a very small portion of what is in this brain.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
And we do not understand how it works. I have the weirdest thing that happens when I'm writing. So I'll be writing and I type. That's how I do it. I don't write to write it out by hand. I don't write fast enough. And so I'm typing and it's coming up on my screen. Well, I know what I'm typing, right? I mean, I'm typing it because it's in my mind and I'm typing, but I'm also reading it. And when I read it, I start to cry or I start to laugh or whatever, as though I had no idea that was going to happen, even though it's been in my head and I typed it out.
Yeah.
So it makes you feel a little crazy. But what it shows me is that we have different things happening in our brain that they're not necessarily talking.
Yeah.
Like what's going on over here isn't necessarily. And so when I'm reading it, it's obviously in a different portion of where it's coming out. And it's like the right side finally hears what the left side was talking about. It's crazy, but knowing that there's all kinds of things that go on that we do not understand.
Yep.
So
true. Absolutely true.
I mean, for me, it happens that I know two different things. I remember them, but sometimes I make the connection between these too late because this date, that's today. Oops. Or maybe it was yesterday. So I knew on that date something that happens, but
it didn't. It's
no connection.
It's like the two sides don't talk.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily talk.
Yeah.
And when they do, it's like, oh.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Teri, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
Just, head over to my website, sign up for my newsletter. I would love to have you sign up for my newsletter. I do not spam you. You get 2 newsletters a month. So, it's not overwhelming. In one of them, I always try to give a book review. And in the other one, I just tell you a little bit of news about things that I'm up to or, what's been going on. Follow me on my social media. The best place to do that is to go to my website. And so it's my name, TeriMBrown.com. And that's Teri with 1 R. You can follow all my social media. I also have a contact form. So reach out if you have questions, comments, pieces of research I got wrong, whatever it is, send it on to me. I would love to hear from you. And of course, buy the books.
Yes, absolutely.
Someone told me the other day, Teri, you didn't tell them to buy the books. And I said, I thought that was obvious. And they said, no, it's not. And I said, okay, then buy the books.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Dear listeners, buy the books. You will not regret it. It's a wonderful read, both of them. And you will, yes, there's more to come, and you will enjoy the journey with Teri's characters. So, Teri, thank you so much for joining us again. It was a pleasure having you on again. And
thank you so much.
You're welcome, and you're always welcome back.
Wonderful.
You did enjoy this episode as much as we did? Then hit subscribe and don't miss the next episode. Also, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you like to support us and buy us a coffee, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee and other platforms. You can find all the necessary links in the description. Until next time.